Hey guys, it's CrafTea and today I'm going to be doing a cake baking video. Don't forget to subscribe down below and give this video a thumbs up, and now let's get into it. Hello everybody, my name is Teagan and today I'm going to be showing you guys all how to make this mint chocolate chip Oreo cake. Okay, so the first step in this cake is to bake the cake, obviously. So the dry ingredients that you will need are cocoa powder, flour, sugar, baking soda, baking powder, and salt. And then the wet ingredients that you will be needing are eggs, plain yogurt, warm water, oil, and vanilla. So the first step is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Once you've preheated the oven, you want to take your baking sheet. You're going to want to butter this. Make sure you get all of the sides and just a little bit on the bottom. We're going to be putting down parchment paper in a minute, so you don't really need to get it on the bottom, but make sure you get all of the corners and the sides. Once you've buttered all of these sides and the edges, you want to take some parchment paper. Make sure it's parchment paper, not wax paper, because wax paper melts in the oven. You're going to want to lay your parchment paper down into your baking sheet and then cut it off. Make sure you smooth it all out so there's no corners sticking out so the batter doesn't go underneath. Then you're going to set that aside and we're going to work on the batter. I'm going to be using the bowl to my stand mixer because I have a stand mixer, but if you don't have a stand mixer, you can use an electric beater or a whisk and a spatula. Anything will do, you'll just have to do a little more manual labor. Once you have grabbed your bowl, you're also going to want to grab a sieve. And to your bowl, you're going to want to sift 3/4 of a cup of cocoa powder. A tip for measuring the perfect amount of your ingredients is to take the back of a knife and push the rest of the ingredient off of the cup so you get a completely flat surface. If you guys did not know that, I think it's a very helpful tip and I do it every time I'm baking. Next, add 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1.5 cups of brown sugar. And for the brown sugar, you're not going to want to sift this, you're just going to want to dump it through. Next, add 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Make sure you got everything out of your sieve and then put the sieve to the side. You're going to want to whisk this until all of the dry ingredients are incorporated. This shouldn't take too long, 30 seconds to a minute should be good. Once your dry ingredients are all mixed together, you're going to want to add your wet ingredients, starting with your 2 eggs. Then you're just going to beat the mixture until it looks like a wet sand. Then you're going to add your yogurt. I'm using plain yogurt. Make sure you beat after every ingredient that you're adding to make sure your mixture gets nice and smooth. And then add your water. I had a little mishap when I was adding in my water. It literally spilled everywhere. Then you're going to want to add your oil and vanilla. Once you've mixed that for a while, you want to scrape down the sides of your bowl with a spatula. This makes sure all of the ingredients are mixed together, not stuck on any of the sides. And then you want to do one final mix. Once all of the ingredients are fully incorporated, you want to bring back in your greased baking tray and pour your batter right into it. Make sure you get every last drop from your bowl because you don't want to waste any. You want to smooth your batter out so it gets to all of the edges and make it roughly smooth on the edge. It should smooth out in the oven anyway, but just get it roughly smooth. And then the next step that I did was take my flour nails. Now these are special things in baking that you use to make flowers on top of, but you stick these in your cake so that it'll bake evenly when you're making a tray. I know you guys don't have these. Just make a roll out of tin foil and stick them in the same places that I did. And as I said, that'll just help your sheet cake bake evenly through the oven. And then I took my cake and stuck it into my preheated oven for 20 minutes. You just want to let this bake. And once my timer went off, I took a skewer. You can use a toothpick, a knife, a fork, anything that you could poke a cake with. And you just want to poke right in the middle of the cake because the middle of the cake takes the longest to bake, and that's how you can tell if the cake is ready. So if you poked a toothpick in the middle of the cake and it came out clean, your cake is fully baked and ready to come out of the oven. If it's not, you should leave it in for another 2 to 5 minutes and then check it again. My cake was baked, so I took it out, and then you want to let it cool in the pan for 10 to 15 minutes. And then once the 10 to 15 minutes are up, you want to move it onto a wire rack and let it cool completely. You also want to remove your flour nails or tin foil. And that is the chocolate cake all ready for the next step. Okay, so now we are on to the next step, which is the icing. Now, for this cake, I'm just going to be making a very simple buttercream icing. This is, I'd say, the easiest icing to make for any cake, and it's really good for icing the sides and the tops of cakes and also making decorations. So, the ingredients that you will be needing for the buttercream icing are butter, icing sugar, peppermint extract, Oreos, and I forgot to show them here, but you will also need some whipping cream and some green food coloring. If you couldn't tell, we are going to be making a cookies and cream mint buttercream icing. This buttercream is so good. I can literally eat it by the spoonful. So the first step to making it is to add your butter to your stand mixer or your bowl and an electric mixer, or a spatula and your arm. Again, as I said, with the cake making, it'll just be a lot more physical labor, but you can definitely do it. So to my stand mixer, I added 1 cup of butter. If you didn't know, a helpful tip for measuring butter is that there are measuring things on the side of the butter, so you can just cut it without having to measure it into a cup and then try to scrape it out. You want to beat your butter until your butter is a nice creamy consistency and it looks a little bit lighter than what it started with. Beating your butter in the baking terms is creaming it, so once you've creamed your butter, you want to add your sifted powdered sugar. I sifted this while I was measuring it out so that it wouldn't take so long. You want to sift your powdered sugar because if you don't, you'll get big lumps of powdered sugar and it will just not be as nice of a buttercream. So make sure you do that. You want to alternate adding your 3 cups of powdered sugar and your 3 tablespoons of whipping cream so that you don't get a big explosion of icing sugar all over your counter like I did. Making icing is definitely the messiest part because the powdered sugar just goes everywhere. You do really want to take your time with this because if you add all of the powdered sugar at once, it will not mix in properly and you will also just have a really hard time mixing it in. So make sure you add it in slowly and take your time. It will really help you out if you take it slow. After you've added all of your powdered sugar and your whipping cream, you want to add your 1 teaspoon of peppermint extract. This gives the buttercream such a delicious flavor. I absolutely love peppermint flavored things. Once you've added your peppermint extract, you want to scrape down the sides of your bowl and add some green food coloring. I just added a little bit to make it a nice pastel green. You want to add less food coloring than you think you need because food coloring is very potent. And you can always add more, but you cannot take away. Mixing in the food coloring is literally so satisfying to me. I absolutely love watching the icing change colors. Also, don't forget to clean off your utensils so you don't waste any icing. The next thing that you want to do is get another bowl and separate half of your buttercream that you just made. You want to use half of it, just eyeball it. I didn't measure, but you just want to approximately get half in one bowl and half in the other. To one of those bowls, you're going to be adding crushed Oreo cookies. So I took a bag and I added 8 Oreo cookies to it. And I took a mallet for mashing meat and I mashed the Oreo cookies. You can use anything. You can use a spoon, you can use a rolling pin, you can use really anything to smash your cookies. You could also put it in a food processor if you want to. I was just being lazy and I didn't want to get out another piece of machinery. And it's also kind of fun to mash the cookies. Once you've mashed them into a pretty fine powder, you want to add it into one of your bowls of icing and mix it all together. This icing is so good. I absolutely love it. And then the other icing bowl you're just gonna leave absolutely plain. It is good how it is. The one with the cookies is gonna be on the inside and the one without the cookies is gonna be on the outside of the cake. And that's it for the buttercream. You just want to set it aside until we use it later. Okay, now for the final step, which is the assembly. Since we baked our cake on a sheet pan, you are going to have to grab a bowl or anything with a circular shape to use as a guide to cut out the circles of cake. I used a bowl for this and a knife, and I just placed my bowl closest to the edge because you want to make sure that you can fit 3 bowls on the one sheet tray, if that makes any sense. So as you can see here, I just placed the bowl down and I used my knife to cut around it, and then I moved my bowl, placed it next to the first circle, cut it out, and then placed it at the edge of the sheet tray until I got 3 different pieces of cake. You will have a ton of scraps, so you can just eat that, or you can make a different recipe with this. You can make cake pops, which I think are really fun, or you could just eat it, as I said. You want to be careful pulling out your cake circles because you don't want them to get all crumbly and broken apart, because since you did cut it, there are going to be rough edges, so the cake is going to be really crumbly. So just be extra careful about that. Once you've cut out your circles, you just want to set them aside and grab a plate to assemble the whole cake on. As you can see in these shots, I am also using a thing that is called a turntable. This is something I got a little while ago, and I found it so helpful to make cakes. It just helps you when you're icing the cake to spin it around without having to turn it on the table. I know you guys are not going to have this, but if you're thinking of making a whole bunch of cakes, I would definitely recommend it. So the first step to assembling the cake is just to take a little bit of icing and put it down on the plate. This is another tip because this will prevent your cake from sliding around. So once you've put a little bit of icing on the bottom, you want to take your first layer of cake and set it down in the middle of your plate. Then you want to take the buttercream with the chunks of Oreo in it and spread half of it onto the layer of cake that you just put down. You want to get it nice and smooth and even. Make sure your cake is level. Just look at it from the side, sort of look down, make sure it's all level, because this will make your whole cake wonky if it is wonky here. Once you've made it all nice and smooth, you want to put the next layer of cake on top. Push it just a little bit, don't push it too hard or else your cake will fall apart, and then add the rest of your Oreo buttercream on top. Again, get it nice and smooth. I'm using a spatula for this. It is called an offset spatula. This is another baking thing. You can just use a butter knife, but I really love my offset spatula and I never make a cake without it. And then finally you want to add your last cake round. And then the next step is to give your cake a crumb coat. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but that is basically just as it sounds. It is to keep the crumbs of your cake into your cake before you do the final layer. So I took the plain buttercream and I took some of it on my spatula and I scraped it around the edge. And as you will see while you're making this, there are going to be a ton of crumbs stuck into this layer and it'll look kind of ugly, but that is the point of the crumb coat. It is to make it look ugly so that all of the crumbs will stick in and you won't see it on the final layer. I would recommend icing the top of the cake first. I didn't do that. I would recommend putting a little bit of icing on the top, smoothing that out, and then doing the sides. Unfortunately, I don't really have any tips for smoothing it out. I know a lot of people have trouble with this. I really think it is just practice. I've had a lot of practice with cakes and I feel like I can get it pretty smooth. I didn't get it super smooth on this cake, but I'm sure you can get the point. One tip that I do have is to make sure you're holding your spatula or your knife, whatever you're using to smooth it out, parallel to your cake so that your cake does not go like leaning this way, and you want to make it parallel to each side. Once you've done your crumb coat, you want to stick it in the freezer for 20 to 25 minutes so that the crumb coat will get nice and cold, so when you put the other layer, it won't get all mixed together. So once your cake has been in the freezer for 20 to 25 minutes, you want to check that it's ready by pushing on the side, and if it doesn't indent, you're good. And now it is time for the actual coat that you will be seeing on the outside of this cake. You want to use the same buttercream. I hope my neighbor is not doing that this entire time. So again, I took my offset spatula and the icing and I iced all around these sides. This coat is more important because it's going to be the outside layer, so try to make it as smooth as you can. Obviously, it's going to take practice, so if you can't get it as smooth, it's really fine. It's all going to taste the same. So as I said, for the crumb coat, you want to do the top of the cake first, smooth that all out, and then do the sides. Hopefully, all of your crumbs are staying in and you can't see any of the crumbs on the outside if you've done it correctly. Again, remember to try to make them as parallel as possible and try not to lift up your knife as much as possible. Try to go in one continuous motion. That way you won't get all those like lumpy lines on your cake. This part is the longest I find, just smoothing it out, and I'm a perfectionist, so I can do this forever, just trying to get it as smooth as I possibly can. Again, don't beat yourself up for this. As I said before, it does take a lot of practice, so just do your best. But you eventually have to stop somewhere. So once you've smoothed out the top and the sides of your cake, you want to do this little trick, and I don't really know what this is called, but you take your spatula and you scrape the top of your cake's edge, and this will make your cake look so professional. I didn't learn how to do this until a couple years ago, and it has changed my cake game. I just think the cakes look so much better when you do that little trick that you shave off the top of the cake's icing. This is not going to make any sense. I hope you can see in this video that I'm showing you. It just makes your cakes look so professional. This is what it looked like after the final coat was all nice and smoothed out. Once you've done that, you want to set your cake to the side. Now for the second time, I am taking more Oreo cookies. I'm using the thin ones here, but you can use any kind really. And I'm putting them into a sandwich bag and I'm smashing them up. You want them super fine, even more fine than the icing ones that we did earlier. And this is for the decoration on the side. Once you've smashed the Oreo cookies up, you want to set them to the side and bring back in your cake. You do not want to stick your cake in the freezer because the sides will get non-sticky, and so you won't be able to stick anything onto it and it'll be really difficult. So make sure your cake is at room temperature. And then you want to take some of your Oreo crumbles in your hand and smash it into the side. This is a very fun part of it, but it also is very messy. You just want to smash it into the side so it sticks all over the sides of it. I only went halfway up the cake because I really like that look. But honestly, if you want to, you could do the whole side. You just want to do this all around the cake. And then once I did that, I dumped off the excess cookie that landed on the edge of my plate. And then I took my offset spatula and I smushed in the bottom so it just gives it a really crisp edge. I didn't really show this that well, and it's not super necessary. I just wanted it for the presentation. Now I'm going to be using a reusable icing bag, a coupler, and a piping tip. I'm pretty sure you guys are just going to be using an icing bag or a Ziploc bag, which will work about the same. So if you're using a sandwich bag or a piping bag that doesn't have a hole cut into it, you want to take a pair of scissors and just cut the corner off. You do not want to cut too big, you just want a small little circle because this is going to be your piping tip because you guys don't have one. For me, I am taking my piping bag and putting in one part of my coupler, then I'm putting the piping tip on the end, and then I'm screwing the other part of the coupler on. If you don't know what a coupler is, it just makes it so that you can change the icing tips. This is more for if you're doing a whole bunch of different tips, but I'm just using one. But I do like to use a coupler because I find it makes it easier for the icing to come out of the bag.
Then I just took my spatula and I scraped all of the remaining icing into the bag. As you can see, I folded over the edge of the bag. This just makes it so the actual bag isn't getting coated in icing.
Then you want to bring back in your piping bag, and I'm going to be doing these little dollops on the top.
Here I showed you the proper way to hold an icing bag. You want to make this sort of L shape with your finger and then wrap it around the icing bag that you've twisted. You'll be able to get the hang of it once you've done it a couple of times.
This is kind of what my birthday cake looked like. I'm just going to be doing the same little dollops except for with a normal round tip. You want to start in the middle and go around in a circle and then pull up and then push down just a tiny bit and then pull up. This will make the perfect little dollop. This is again very, very much practice based. And if you've never done this before, I would highly recommend you to practice this on a piece of parchment paper or even on just a regular piece of paper so you could get the motion down. This will help so much in making them before you put it on the cake. But once you've practiced, you can do it on the cake, and I just did them all around the edges. And then the final step for this cake is just to do the Oreo decoration on the top. So I took some of the mint Oreos and I cut them in half on my cutting board. I did 6 because I had 12 little dollops on top. You want to count how many dollops you did on the top, divide that by 2, and that is how many Oreo cookies you will need. And as I said, I just put them on my cutting board, cut them in half so there were 2 even halves. And then I took those halves and stuck them right into the dollops on top.
You don't want to push the Oreo cookies too hard into the dollops that you made, or else your dollops will just get mushed together. But just push them in as much as they need to stay in place, and you're done.
And this looks so good. That is the final cake. I think it turned out so nicely. I am so happy with it. The chocolate cake base is so moist, and it is my favorite chocolate cake recipe I have ever used. I've done a lot of testing, so I hope you guys liked this cake, and I hope this little video was helpful. And since this is the end, I might as well do a little bit of self promo. I have a YouTube channel where I do some baking videos and a lot of other random videos. So if you guys haven't heard of my YouTube channel, it is called CrafTea. You can just look it up on YouTube. So that's it for this video. If you guys liked it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below because I'm trying to reach 400 subscribers and I would really appreciate it if you can make that happen. This was for my youth event, so if you're wondering why it was filmed a little differently, I hope you can understand. But yeah, that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!